Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Welcome to another exciting episode of People in Transition, where we deep dive into helping you navigate the ever-evolving world of career transitions and job searches. Whether you're actively looking for your next role or planning a future move, today's episode is packed with actionable insights that will give you a competitive edge. We're thrilled to have Mark James back with us as our guest. Mark is the president of Hire Consulting Services and has been helping professionals land their dream jobs for over 25 years. As a certified executive coach, Mark has a unique approach that goes beyond the traditional coaching. He builds strategic partnerships with executives, helping them design customized job search strategies to reach their career goals. In today's conversation, we'll discuss Mark's latest book, The Recruiter Mindset, where he reveals insider tips on working with recruiters, building a standout job search marketing plan, optimizing your LinkedIn profile, mastering virtual interviews, and so much more. If you're ready to take control of your career and achieve your next big move, this episode is for you. Good morning, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Bob. This is a great time of the year. I finally got the heat beat down here and it's cooling off.
That's great to hear. Mark, before we start getting into specific questions that the book provided so much guidance, why did you write the book? What was its purpose? What were you trying to achieve?
Well, my original core offering, my business consulting, was executive recruiting, executive search consulting. And in my first two books, I didn't address anything about executive recruiters, and finally felt the need that I needed to focus one book on how to utilize executive search recruiters for job seekers during their job search campaign. It was overdue, and I'm really glad it's doing well, and I thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
So, Mark, some of our listeners may not even know what exactly a headhunter or an executive recruiter does. And the follow-up question to it is that as candidates are using that executive recruiter, sometimes they're not getting that phone call back from them when they reach out. So can you help explain why that might be the case?
Yeah, I have an old philosophy, and you may have heard this yourself, but recruiters do not find jobs for people. They find good people for good companies. So specifically, an average to above average type of job seeker who has a good track record has a pretty good chance of talking with a recruiter, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be placed. Everything has to align very, very well in order for a search firm or a recruiter, as you say, headhunter, to place an individual into a new company. The reasons why you may not hear back is just simply because sometimes you're not qualified. Recruiters are very, very busy people, and they don't have time to call people back because their time is in demand, and they get quite a few calls every day. And unless you're a good candidate on paper and you look great on LinkedIn, it could be very difficult to get the attention of a recruiter. So you got to understand there's no entitlement to a recruiter's time. If it's your lucky day and you get chosen and you get interviewed and you pass all of the requirements that a recruiter looks for in the ideal candidate, then you're on your way to potentially being placed by a recruiter.
That kind of begs the question, should executive search firms be a part of my job search strategy?
Absolutely, because nothing ventured, of course, means it won't be gained, and you need to play that card. Ideally, though, as we all know, and many people have realized, that networking, relationships, connectivity is the number one way to find a new job. And probably 7 or 8 out of 10 times you're going to get your next job through a networking referral or an introduction to somebody who works on the inside of a target company that you'd like to work for. And if you want proof of that, look back throughout your career. Everybody listening on this call, look at all the different jobs you've had and figure out, how did you get them? Applying for jobs online obviously is not as reliable as getting referred into a company through somebody that knows someone on the inside. Recruiters will probably, out of 10 different times that you get a new job, maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 times you'll be placed by a recruiter. Some people could be even more, depending on your track record and how good you collaborate with search firms and executive recruiters.
Mark, you talk about creating a job search marketing campaign, the JSMP. Can you describe what that is and how do I create that?
Great question. I call it the JSMP, the Job Search Marketing Plan. I created this template years ago, way before, probably back in 99, 98, and I used it for friends and family. And it's essentially a blueprint or a strategy of your entire job search campaign. It starts off with the 3 critical messages, and these are answers to potential interview questions. The number 1 is, what are you looking for in the ideal job, which is your professional objective. The second statement is your positioning statement, also commonly known as the 2-minute elevator pitch, but it answers the question, tell me about yourself, and it's essentially a 2-minute max rendition of who you are without reciting your resume. Don't ever do that. It'll bore people to death. So you want to highlight what you're currently doing. You can also ask the question when someone says, tell me about yourself, you can say, where would you like me to start? It's a good way for them to tell you, and now you have an answer all ready to go. Hopefully you're prepared. The third and final statement on the JSMP is the most difficult for many people. It's called the exit statement. It's your reason for leaving or reason for looking for a new job. And it's got to be airtight. And this requires practice, rehearsal, and it has to make sense. You can't dance around the issue why you are looking or why you left your last job. The other part of the JSMP addresses your top 8 stories or examples throughout your career. And these are typically illustrated as bullets on your resume. These are stories that come alive during the interview that you need to be prepared to talk about, how you delivered, what you contributed, your accomplishments. And then the final part of the JSMP is your target industry, target companies, and I mean as much information as you can put down as to your desired type of company that you want to work for. The size, the revenue, the number of employees, the location, the products, services, and you break it down by 3 industries and you list up to 20 companies for each industry. I try to keep it simple and concise so that people don't go all over the map, kind of like a puppy dog on a leash without a plan. And that's why I created this job search marketing plan for my coaching clients, and it works amazingly well.
And Mark, other than your clients, do you find candidates using something like this?
Typically, they may have an organizational type of template that they've created that they send me, but typically, I just don't see it enough. And people are winging it, so to speak. They're fire ready aim. They don't take the time to really plan out their search when it is one of the most important things they need to do at the very beginning when they first get notified that their job's being eliminated or they are trying to upgrade their career and get into a better, more utilized type role in a company.
Do you think that's what's holding them back, time, or maybe it's fear that they need to be doing something? None of this back of the house kind of stuff. I got to be out there doing stuff, even if it's the wrong stuff.
Well, I talk about the fundamentals of a job search campaign with all my clients on a regular basis. They need to be focused. They need to have a plan every day of the week. One of the things that I like to challenge them with is do 5 unique things dedicated to your search every day. What I mean by unique is not just send an email, but yes, get out of the house, go to an event, have an informational interview with someone you know that is currently working so that you can pick their brain, find out what advice they would offer you during your search. Again, unique things could be reaching out to 5 recruiters a week, introducing yourself via phone, follow up with a resume in the email directly to the person, not just a blast into the company website, but person-to-person communication is essential. Obviously, you got to take everything into consideration when you're applying for jobs online. You don't even know who's looking at your resume. As we both know, I call this the black hole. What goes in, sometimes nothing comes out, and you don't even know who's looking at your resume when you send it into an applicant tracking system software, which is what most companies are using today.
Mark, you did some focus group work, some survey work with HR vice presidents and directors. And based on those feedback that you received, you came up with a listing of characteristics of an ideal candidate, some red flags that recruiters and hiring managers are looking at, and that ideal wish list that hiring manager might have. Why don't you pick a couple from each of those 3 buckets and describe those characteristics?
Well, obviously, you want somebody who's going to have a good-looking resume that is formatted properly, somebody who can explain what they were able to contribute in their last role. And I'm not just talking about features and benefits or everyday duties and responsibilities, but somebody is going to have to demonstrate that they have contributed to an organization. They're going to have to be cooperative. I like speaking to people over the phone in the very beginning and understanding what makes them tick, what they're excited about, what's their passion. The red flags can be easily talked about. People get a little nervous. I ask them, why are you looking for a new job? And if they say the wrong things, like I want to increase my salary, it's not a good answer. You can't be looking for a job just because you need to make more money. It's a giveaway that says you're desperate, anxious, and needy. So I get a little nervous when I hear that. But if somebody says to me, I'm not being fully utilized in my current role, I want to upgrade my opportunity to work with a great company. Those are good answers. You got to be careful and never badmouth the company. That would be a huge red flag. Don't talk negative about anyone, including whether or not you had a tough boss that just you guys didn't get along. That's okay. Don't bring it up. The ideal candidates are going to be marketable, meaning I know that 5 jobs in 5 years is not going to be too marketable. So you've got to have good reasons why you change jobs, and it has to make sense when you're talking to search firms and or a human resource or a hiring authority in a company.
Does gaps in the person's work history bother you as much today as what it did 5-10 years ago?
Not really. I mean, the scarlet letter of being unemployed really doesn't exist anymore. There are a lot of people, good people that are out of work today. They just have to be able to explain it. I need good, matter-of-fact, understandable, and credible answers. If people are winging it, I can tell. For instance, a big question I ask is, what are you looking for in the ideal job? This is an answer that people flippantly sometimes just say, I'm really open to many opportunities. Or if you ever hear the term, I'm industry agnostic, oh my gosh, it's the worst thing you can possibly say to a search firm or a hiring authority, because they're not going to take the time to figure that out. You need to be able to let them know specifically exactly what it is you see yourself doing and making strong contributions to the company.
Yeah, when I get the answer, if I ask the candidate, what are you looking for? What kind of position? And they come back and say, I can really do anything. I'm a fast learner. And my response back to them is, I don't have any position called I can do anything. You need help guide me.
I agree. I always say, you cannot be the 10th player on a baseball team. That's not a job. You need to be a first baseman, second, shortstop, outfielder. Tell me what it is you do. So I don't have to guess as to what kind of job that I have in my arsenal that might be a fit unless I know exactly what it is that's going to make you happy.
Let's shift gears just a little bit here, Mark, and let's talk about resumes and how you coach your clients how to write a resume that hiring managers, recruiters will read.
Well, in my book, I have a reference internet domain name that people can go to and see my preferred recruiter resumes. It's listed in my book, not hard to find. An early graduate or an MBA student that has a one-page resume is just fine, as long as it's formatted properly. I know they like to tout their new education and put it up front on top, but I always suggest you put your education on the bottom of the last page or the first page, because it forces the recruiter to scan quickly and look for the education. Then if they're impressed, they'll go back and scan again. But again, you got to realize you've got 5 to 10 seconds of their attention and they're moving on. If they like what they see, they'll probably look back and see your cover letter and read what your objective is. So a middle to senior level executive is probably going to have a 2 to 3 page resume, which is just fine, which includes all of your career employment. I mean, maybe for the last 15, 20 years since you left college. So again, I don't discriminate, but I need to be impressed by what they see on paper. And I want to see their LinkedIn profile. If it's done properly and it mirrors the same kind of information on their resume, then there's a good possibility I want to have a conversation.
Let's flip that coin over. You've talked about what you want to see. What are some of the pitfalls that you've seen candidates do to their resume that's going to make it more difficult for them to stand out?
Yeah, when they do multiple fonts, lots of color, wingdings, and they put hyperlinks of their former employers, which is all distraction. It just takes me away from their resume, which is not a good idea. I just don't think that that's necessary. A good conservative type of classical resume with your header and your name and your LinkedIn profile and your contact info at the top. The next area, I call it an area of expertise, along with your professional summary, which is also very close to your 2-minute elevator pitch. It's your positioning statement that's illustrated on your resume right above an area of keywords. And then get into your experience in a reverse chronological resume, followed by your education and additional training or certifications that you have been additionally trained in throughout your career, rather than just have a college degree from 15 years ago and no more training. I think that looks like, what have you been doing this whole time? Keeping the resume in a good format, and it's easy to scan and read, and be ready to answer questions about the bullets. Bullets are illustrated as action equaling a result and not job description statements.
You talk about what you should say on LinkedIn if you've been laid off. If we expand that a little bit and say, what should you say on your resume or the cover letter or LinkedIn if you've been laid off? What do you coach your clients?
I don't think it's necessary unless if somebody's been with the job for 4+ years, that speaks for itself. If they've had multiple jobs in a short period of time, they can easily explain that. Like, for instance, one of my clients had just been released by his company because they merged with another company and there was duplicate positions. And unfortunately, his position was eliminated and, he was released by the company. So he just simply puts down underneath the company name, acquired by ABC company in the year, and that would be reason why he's no longer with the company. He can explain that in an interview or a phone screen if asked, but I always suggest they disarm it by bringing it up first. You can illustrate this in a cover letter, but let it be just a simple statement that they have left the company, they're no longer working there presently, and that would be an answer that they're going to provide to an interview during an interview or a phone screen to a recruiter or hiring authority.
Mark, in the book, you talk about 10 tips to optimize your LinkedIn presence. First, please explain to our listeners what optimize means in this case, and then pick a few of those items and explain how to do them and the potential impact that it has.
Yeah, I mean, the main areas that I look at first is your headshot. It's got to be a professional headshot. I don't recommend anything other than a professional headshot because you want to give your best impression. An ounce of image is worth a pound of performance. The headline banner cannot be titles and companies. It needs to be who you are, what you deliver, what are your contributions or deliverables. And you've got quite a few lines. If you look at my LinkedIn profile online, you'll see I've maximized and optimized everything I could to give the right impression as to what I do. And it's the same thing with a job seeker. They have to have a really good about section that uses all 2,000 characters, including your contact info, making sure your phone number and your email is there. Big mistake. Sometimes people don't even realize that if you don't have your phone number in multiple spots on your LinkedIn profile, you're not going to get a phone call. You might get an email through the InMail, but people are going to want to know how to call you, and that's what you want to receive, phone calls, right? That's the number one easiest way to communicate. So a headshot, getting a good headline banner that describes who you are and what you do, and then your about section has to talk about who you are, what you do, what your passions are, and make it personal. You have the ability in LinkedIn to personalize it, whereas a resume is written in the third person, a little more formal, more conservative. But the LinkedIn profile is where a lot of recruiters will use. Obviously, you know this, Bob, is almost 96% of the recruiters in the United States and the world, for that matter, are using LinkedIn exclusively as their database.
Mark, in the book, you talk about the 5 C's of what recruiters are looking for. And I thought this was a great summary. And to ask yourself, how am I showing these 5 C's? Can you go through it for our listeners and what you would expect to hear from a candidate in those areas?
Obviously, you've got to be competent. You've got to be able to do the job. You've got to be cooperative, collaborative. You have to be able to communicate right. I'm at a point where I can tell how capable the candidate will be based on how dialed in they are when they're answering questions. I look at the whole package as quickly as I can and determine, is this somebody that I'm going to send an email reply that requires their response to several questions that I have designed based on what I know the company is looking for in the ideal candidate. And I have to have that feel-good feeling that says this is a good candidate. It will make me look good as a recruiter, and it should let the company know that I've done my job well. And these characteristics that I look for, it's different for everybody, okay? I just kind of capsulized it in what I write in my book and what we look for in the ideal candidate, as well as being cooperative and following up accordingly and not wasting people's time. Very, very important part of the beginning to get noticed and stay on a recruiter's radar.
Mark, you list 23 tough interview questions and answering strategies in your book. And I thought this was a great list of them. Pick a couple that you know your clients have had experience with and struggled with, and how do you suggest someone respond to those tough interview questions?
The top 3 or 4 questions that you're going to get is, first, tell me about yourself. We talked a little bit about that earlier in the call. They got to be ready to talk about who they are, what they do. Don't ever recite the resume. You also need to be ready to talk about why you're looking for a new job. If you're reaching out to a recruiter, when I get calls, why are you calling me? Why are we talking today? What's going on? You need to be ready to talk about your current situation. Another one is, I want to know what they believe their strengths are. What do you believe your top 5 strengths are? When you get to a question about how they impact their own organization, I want to know about a time when they took the initiative and what was the result. And that better be a bullet on your resume, by the way. If it's that important that you're going to recite a deliverable or a contribution where you took the initiative, it better be a bullet on your resume. And then I want to know how they respond under pressure. Tell me about a time when you were under pressure. What happened? And you have to give me a philosophy. Start with a philosophy. Hey, you say, Mark, I believe high achievers should be able to perform well under pressure. It's a great concept, a good comeback. But then you need to follow it up by saying, let me give you an example when I was under pressure. And now you're going to recite a story under 2 minutes. And again, this needs to be a bullet on your resume. So if you tie all these things in together and you answer these questions very fluidly, comfortably, confidently, you're going to make a good impression with a search firm.
Mark, so many interviews today are done over Zoom or some kind of video capacity. And in your book, you list some suggestions to help maximize the experience that you have on Zoom. Go through a few of these that you coach your clients on.
Well, it's just like you and I or any kind of a podcast when we're doing meetings. You've been in the ranks with a company and they want to call a meeting with all the department heads. You have to be ready. You have to look the part, have your notes ready in front of you. In this case, for a job seeker, you want to have your resume, the questions that you want to be asked and the anticipated questions that could be coming your way with ideas on how to handle those questions, right? Script it out, rehearse with somebody before you're put on the spot. Why would you want to recite the answer to an interview question for the first time in a real interview when you can practice it and get it out and make it flow, and that you are getting somebody to weigh in that's listening to you and give you the feedback? So interviews on Zoom, they're here to stay. Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, you and I are on Skype today. Everybody is using different methods for virtual meetings because it saves time. Gas prices are high, so nobody wants to meet unless it's going to be an ultimate final candidate. I want to meet the candidate, and so does the company. So everybody will figure a way how to get together. But it's going to start with a phone call, which could lead to a Zoom meeting, and it could be a panel Zoom meeting with multiple people in the company speaking or witnessing the interview with you in the hot seat, being interrogated, so to speak. But the good news is nobody can dispute what was said in the interview. Whereas if you're doing separate interviews, individually, there could be conflicts of what was said and what you're capable of doing. But when it's all in one Zoom meeting with multiple people, everybody hears it for the first time.
Mark, my listeners like to hear success stories of clients that you have. No names, of course. Maybe someone that came in that was struggling, and after your coaching, they landed that next great job. Can you think of one that highlights that journey that the candidate went through?
Yeah, I've got a great story that actually was told by the candidate in a meeting, and everybody was uplifted because things like this can happen and you wouldn't know it unless you simply walked the dog around the block. And this particular individual was looking for a marketing executive role, and he had applied online. A recruiter called and said, "We like you, but you're overqualified," because he's a chief marketing officer candidate as opposed to a VP. And he accepted that. And then he's walking his dog around the block and he meets a neighbor who happens to be on the board of directors for the company that he has sent his resume into. And the board of director said, "Hey, I like you. I think your background is probably better, and we need to redo the job request and increase it to a higher level." And the next thing he knows, he's getting called by the recruiter saying, "Come on in, we want to interview you." They think that they might be more interested in getting someone with more experience like you. And what happens is he goes in, he's got the board of directors sponsoring, mentoring him because he's a neighbor, and he gets the job. It wouldn't have happened had he not walked the dog that day and stopped and talked for 15, 20 minutes and found out the correlation and the possibilities of coming in the door through the back door, through a board of director introduction and referral. So great story. He told it, and he'd been with the company for 8 years, and now he's got another new job. But he talks about that as it's kind of like the universal law of serendipity, right, Bob? We walk out the door, you make a choice, and things can happen.
I tell people you never know who out there that you might bump into that can be a door opener. Always keep that in mind. Mark, as we wind down here, any other books or resources besides yours, of course, that you would recommend our listeners use to help them find their next great job?
There's a book out that I always tell all college students, MBAs, and even senior executives. It's called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. It's a great book. It literally helps people understand the importance of getting out of the house, having a cup of coffee or a tuna sandwich with somebody and do an informational interview, which is going to increase your chances of landing when you conduct 10, 12 informational interviews with people. You learn from them vicariously and how they got to where they're at internally with the company, and they are going to be impressed with you, and they may refer you to two people they know because they like you, and it's because you have that face-to-face meeting. That's what the book theme is about. Also, I like the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. It's a book written by Marshall Goldsmith back in 2005 or 6, and it's a bestseller on Amazon. It's one of his best books. As you know, he talks about the things we don't do well in leadership roles. And I love every one of them is a mistake that we have made throughout our career, and it kind of opens up into how you can improve yourself. But what got you here won't get you there. Great book by Marshall Goldsmith. I've got a few of them, but those are the two that resonate most with me as far as job search and career management.
We've gone through so much great information today. Thank you so much for that. If our listeners really only can remember 2 or 3 things to implement them starting next week to help them in their job search, Mark, what's those 2 or 3 things that you want them to take away?
All right. Well, I'm going to shameless plug, buy my book, read it, and then connect with me on LinkedIn. If you have some comments on the book, I would love to hear them. Also, you cannot underestimate the power of your network. I like to say that network is a noun, not just a verb, and vice versa. Networking is the lifeblood of everyone's career. And if you're not telling your story on a daily basis, it's because you're in transition or you're planning to make a job change, you're not happy with your current company or supervision, the leadership, you got to talk to people and do informational interviews. I've said this several times on this call. It is one of the best unused, kept secret of job search is conducting informational interviews. Look it up. It's in my book as well.
Mark, I want to make certain that you know how much information that you shared this morning. You just did a great job. Thank you for sharing those things. I really do appreciate it. And I echo what Mark was saying, go out and buy his book. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Bob. It has been a pleasure, and I appreciate the time we spend together.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.